When you think about truly massive wealth, the kind of money that just reshapes the entire economy, your mind probably jumps straight to today's tech billionaires.
Oh, absolutely. You think Bezos, Musk, maybe Bill Gates, they're the benchmark for modern success.
Right. But the thing is, if you actually adjust the numbers for inflation, and this is the important part, for relative share of the economy, none of them are even in the same league as the single wealthiest businessman in history.
John D. Rockefeller.
John D. Rockefeller. It's a staggering figure. His peak net worth in today's money is estimated at around $400 billion.
And his company, Standard Oil, might have been worth over $1 trillion. That record is still unbroken.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack the story of Standard Oil and really understand how he built this empire. An empire so powerful that its founder's wealth is still unmatched almost a century later.
And to get there, you really have to start at the beginning, which is, let's just say it was complicated. Rockefeller was born in upstate New York, 1839.
And his father was this traveling salesman character, right?
He was. He called himself a botanic physician. But what he was really doing was selling these, 19th century elixirs. He was a con artist, basically, away for weeks at a time.
And the sources describe this confusing household, which seems like a bit of an understatement.
It really is. Because his father wasn't just away on business. He would come back home and sometimes he'd bring other children he'd had with another woman.
Wow.
And they would just live there with his wife and his other children. It was chaotic.
So what does that kind of environment teach a young boy?
Well, it teaches you not to trust the central provider, for one. It forced John to become obsessed with self-reliance, with managing every single penny. He learned how to hustle, how to demand the best deal, down to the last cent he earned raising turkeys for neighbors.
That was his real education then, survival.
Exactly, survival through maximization.
Eventually, his family lives in Cleveland, Ohio in 1854. He tries a bit of formal schooling, but it doesn't really stick.
No, he was all about practical knowledge. In 1855, he gets a job as a bookkeeper. He's making 50 cents a day.
Just 50 cents.
A pittance. But it was crucial. It gave him this fundamental understanding of accounting, of logistics. He stayed for 2 years, and then came the first big pivot. He asked for a real raise. They said no, and he just walked. Decided to start his own produce brokerage.
That's such a Rockefeller move. If you won't value me, I'll create my own system.
And get this. Because he had this amazing reputation for being meticulous and honest as a bookkeeper, he secured a $4,000 loan.
$4,000 for an 18-year-old in 1857. That's insane.
It was an unbelievable sum. But the banks were right to trust him. In his first year, his brokerage did $500,000 in sales.
$500,000.
Now, he only got a small commission on that, but the scale of it, the efficiency, it cemented his reputation. Before he was even 20, banks in Cleveland were, and I quote, begging John to borrow money.
But then something happens that changes everything. 1859.
The whole world changes. The first American oil well is discovered just about 100 miles east of him in Pennsylvania. And the oil rush begins.
And we should probably clarify for everyone, what oil was used for back then.
Right, that's a key point. There are no gasoline cars. The big money, the essential product, was kerosene.
For lamps.
For lamps. It lit up the country. Kerosene was basically the electricity of the 1860s.
But Rockefeller, and this is where you see his genius, he decides not to get into drilling.
He refused. He saw it for what it was, a gambler's game. He watched so many people go completely broke chasing a dry hole. He was an accountant, not a gambler.
So his insight was what?
His insight was that the risk was in finding the oil, but the demand for the refined product for kerosene, that was a sure thing.
So let everyone else take the risk.
Exactly. Let them drill. He would just be there to buy their supply. The real steady profit was in refining the black gold, not in finding it.
And he was patient about it, too. He didn't just jump in.
He waited until the moment was perfect. He waited until 1863 when the government finished the railroad connecting the Pennsylvania oil fields directly to Cleveland.
The infrastructure.
Once that critical piece was in place, he launched his first refinery with partners and all the bank funding he could possibly need.
And this brings us right to his obsession with efficiency, which really became the foundation of Standard Oil's power.
His first move was to hire the best. An elite team of chemists and engineers. He was not interested in how things were currently done.
And his team found that the other refineries in Cleveland were incredibly wasteful, right? Something like 60% efficiency.
Shockingly wasteful. Yeah, about 60%, which means 40% of every barrel of crude oil was just thrown away. Sludge, tar, toxic waste.
A huge
A
cost.
huge cost. But Rockefeller's chemists didn't just improve the refining process. They found profitable uses for all of that waste.
So what were once disposal costs became new revenue streams.
Precisely. They started selling paraffin wax for candles, tar for paving roads, naphtha for industrial solvents. It meant Standard Oil could sell its kerosene for a profit at a price that would literally bankrupt anyone else.
Because the other guys were still paying to get rid of their waste?
They were paying to get rid of 40% of their product. The margin was everything. Within 2 years, his refinery was the largest and most advanced in Cleveland.
And he used that efficiency as a weapon for consolidation.
Aggressive consolidation. And when we say aggressive, I mean the speed is just mind-boggling. In 1865, Cleveland has 26 refineries.
Okay.
By 1870, just 5 years later, he had bought all but 4 of them. Then he incorporates as Standard Oil of Ohio.
So how did he do it? How did he take over so many so fast?
He had a two-pronged approach that became, the textbook for monopoly building. First was the friendly invitation.
I'd invite them over.
He'd invite a competitor to his office, open up his immaculate books, and prove to them mathematically that he could operate at a loss longer than they could stay in business. It was a threat, but a polite one, with a spreadsheet.
And the second tactic.
The buyout. And this is where he was so clever. He'd offer a generous price, but the real key was that he would offer the competitors' smartest people, their brightest minds, executive jobs at Standard Oil.
So he didn't just buy the company.
He absorbed their talent. He hollowed them out from the inside.
And for anyone who said no to both.
Then the gloves came off. He would just crater the price of kerosene in their specific market, sometimes by 80%, until he strangled them into bankruptcy or forced them to sell.
So by 1880, he's refining over 90% of the country's oil. 90%. Didn't that create a massive public backlash? How do you even manage the optics of that kind of control?
He managed it by controlling something even more important than the oil itself: the transportation, the infrastructure. This is where his power became almost absolute.
The railroad rebates.
The secret railroad rebates. He was so powerful, he could personally negotiate these deals with the railroad owners.
And we need to be clear about how this worked, because it's more than just a volume discount, isn't it?
Oh, it's so much more. It was a two-part deal. First, yes, he got a huge discount on his own shipments, which cut his costs to almost nothing.
Okay.
But second, and this is the truly corrupt part, he demanded a kickback, a rebate on every single barrel of oil shipped by his competitors.
Wait, so he made money when his competitors shipped their oil?
Yes. Standard Oil profited from its own business and from its competition's business. It's terrifying. It makes a fair fight fundamentally impossible.
And that must have infuriated other industrialists, not just oil guys.
It did. Because if Rockefeller could do it with oil, what was stopping someone else from doing it with steel or coal or anything else shipped by rail? It threatened the entire system.
So that fear, plus the media calling him a robber baron, that's what finally led to a political response.
Exactly. The Ohio legislature started drafting serious antitrust laws to go after Standard Oil of Ohio. But Rockefeller was always one step ahead.
He starts playing what you call the legal shell game.
The ultimate legal shell game. In 1882, he sees the writing on the wall in Ohio, so he dissolves that company and reincorporates in New Jersey.
Why New Jersey?
Because New Jersey's corporate laws were different. Back then, most states, including Ohio, said a corporation couldn't own stock in another corporation. New Jersey allowed it. So he created the Standard Oil Trust, a board of 9 trustees in New Jersey who held the stock of over 40 legally separate companies across the country. It was a legal fortress designed so that no single state could touch the whole operation.
And that's when the empire is at its visible peak.
Sure.
The huge headquarters on Broadway, 20,000 oil wells, thousands of miles of pipeline, 100,000 employees. It looked unstoppable.
It did. But even as he built this domestic fortress, global pressures were starting to build. Massive oil deposits were found overseas, in Russia, in Asia.
And these weren't small-time competitors.
No, this was the Rothschild family developing these fields, and they were pouring money into getting that cheaper foreign oil into American and European markets.
So his grip on global supply was loosening.
It was. And at the same time, the political tide at home finally turned for good. In 1890, the federal government passed the Sherman Antitrust Act,
Which gave them the teeth they needed to go after the whole trust, not just one piece of it in one state.
Exactly. For the first time, they had the legal tools to attack the entire fortress, no matter how it was structured.
But it still took them a long time to do it. The verdict didn't come until 1911.
It took years. The legal structure was so complex it was a nightmare to investigate. But by 1911, Rockefeller was 72. He wasn't even running the company day-to-day anymore. And in the final 20 years, Standard Oil had paid out over $500 million in dividends. He'd already cashed in big time.
So the Supreme Court finally rules, and Standard Oil is ordered to be broken up into 34 separate companies.
The end of the empire, or so it seemed.
Which brings us to the most incredible part of this whole story. Why was the breakup of his company the single most profitable event of his entire life?
Because he kept his stock. He maintained his proportional ownership stake in all 34 of the new, smaller companies.
So when the court broke it up,
They essentially unlocked its value. Wall Street immediately realized that the sum of the parts was worth far, far more than the hated monolithic whole.
right, because investors who were scared of regulatory action against the giant suddenly saw 34 smaller, legally safe companies.
Exactly. And their individual stock prices just exploded overnight. They were no longer toxic, they were lean, competitive, and hugely valuable. Rockefeller's personal net worth went through the roof, cementing his status as the richest American to ever live.
And so many of those companies are still giants today.
They are. Over the decades, they merged back together. Most of the original Standard Oil companies now make up the DNA of ExxonMobil, of Chevron, and BP. His wealth just kept growing until he died in 1937. That's how we get to that $400 billion number.
So when you boil it all down, what does this all mean? It seems like his real genius wasn't just the monopoly, but his foresight to control the infrastructure.
That's it. He understood that whoever controlled the refining and the transportation, they controlled everything. And his obsession with efficiency, with selling every byproduct, that set a price floor his competition just couldn't survive.
And that principle, controlling the systems behind the commodity, that's still the playbook for so many modern monopolies.
It absolutely is. The rail rebates were probably just as important as the oil wells themselves.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to think about. Standard Oil was eventually brought down because it was physical. You could see the pipelines, you could investigate the rail cars. But considering the legal shell game he played, how would regulators today even begin to approach a modern, globally distributed digital monopoly? One that has no physical assets, just code and data. Something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.